Warriors and the Kings will square off up at Golden 1, and we'll have an idea of whether or not the Warriors will be able to continue their season on Friday evening or if this is the end. But we'll talk Warriors later on this evening, a special edition of Dubs OT with John Dickinson and Greg Silver, who are up in Sacramento coming your way around 9:30, 9:45 tonight. I'm Kerry Crowley taking you the rest of the way here on The Leader this evening. And folks, the place that we have to start, unfortunately, is the scene in Miami from tonight where the Giants lose ugly 6-3 to the Miami Marlins, who pick up just their fourth win of the young season. And it really shouldn't have been that way. The Giants got out to an early lead. Matt Chapman hits a nice home run in the second inning, 428 feet. He absolutely crushed a ball off of Ryan Weathers, the 24-year-old starter of the Miami Marlins, formerly of the San Diego Padres. And the Giants pick up another in the third inning. Wilmer Flores doubles in Austin Slater, who looked better out of the leadoff spot tonight. Just 1 for 3, but he hit the ball harder for the Giants. That was one of the few silver linings for this team. So they go up 2-0, but in the fourth inning, the Miami Marlins fight their way back against Jordan Hicks, who's been really good for the Giants this season. We'll get into this a lot throughout the evening tonight. I actually thought that Jordan Hicks competed extremely hard for the Giants tonight. I think that, the fact that the Giants didn't win this game certainly does not fall on Jordan Hicks' shoulders. In fact, in the fourth inning, they had an opportunity to turn a double play. Nick Ahmed with the flip to Tyler Fitzgerald at second, who throws on to Wilmer Flores at first base. But this is a big issue for the Giants. Tyler Fitzgerald was not standing on second base. He was starting in place of Thairo Estrada tonight. The Giants attempting to use Fitzgerald as a utility man. Foot comes off the bag, and so he throws on to first where the throw was late. The Giants don't get either of those base runners, and it puts Jordan Hicks in a bind, and a bind in which he has to throw 37 pitches to ultimately get out of the inning. Ultimately, the Giants do exit the fourth inning with the score at 2-2. Hicks did a really nice job battling back from a 2-out walk to Nick Gordon, got Emmanuel Rivera to fly out to right field, a ball that very well could have been a grand slam in many other ballparks. The Giants were fortunate tonight that they were playing in Miami, because the fact that Austin Slater was able to track that baseball down kept them in the ball game. It's 2-2 in the sixth. That's when Jordan Hicks is lifted in favor of Ryan Walker, who of course has turned into one of Bob Melvin's trusted relievers so far. And in a tie ball game, you want to set the back end of your bullpen up for success. You think that Walker can get the job done, and it was not Ryan Walker's night tonight in the sixth inning. He ends up giving up a leadoff double to Josh Bell down the left field line. Jesus Sanchez then singles, brings Josh Bell up to third base. There's a force out with Tim Anderson bouncing over to Matt Chapman as the Giants once again try to turn two, but it wasn't the cleanest exchange from Tyler Fitzgerald at second base yet again, and that's where the Giants ultimately ceded the lead to the Miami Marlins. It was that 2-2 ball game at the time, runners at first and third, nobody out in the inning for Ryan Walker on the mound. He induces what could have been a 5-4-3 double play ball. The Giants ultimately only get one of those runners out. The go-ahead run comes into score, and the Marlins pick up two more in that inning. They get into a really difficult spot for the Giants where Walker can't finish the frame. Bob Melvin comes out and goes to the left-hander, Taylor Rogers, hoping to limit the damage. And unfortunately for Rogers, he has to face Luis Arraez. And Dave Fleming just said this on the post-game show, to the point where, bases loaded, 2 outs, there's so many great hitters in baseball that you don't want to see in that situation. The Dodgers have 3 of them. Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman come to mind. Matt Olson of the Atlanta Braves, one of the best hitters in baseball in those clutch situations. Even Dave Fleming mentioned Wilmer Flores has some of the best numbers in those situations over the last few years. That was mentioned on the TV broadcast tonight. But Luis Arraez makes such solid contact so consistently. Remember, at the beginning of last season, he flirted with 400, ultimately hit over 350 last year, and he bloops one in down the left field line in front of Michael Conforto, and the Giants never recover. They go down 5-2 at that point. They're able to battle back for one in the seventh inning, but Wilmer Flores grounds into an inning-ending double play. Nick Avila comes on, gives up a run in the seventh, and they are not able to close that gap. So they ultimately lose this one 6-3 in very, very disappointing fashion. This will go down, in my mind, as one of the worst losses of this young season to date. And say young season, the Giants are 18 games in, and they've already lost 11 games. It's a team that, we mentioned this last night, even after a win in the series opener against the Miami Marlins, the Giants have not been playing up to expectations right now. In fact, there are so many components of this team that don't look like they're in rhythm, that don't look like they're together, and look like they could be persistent issues over the course of a 162-game season. So we will take your calls this evening. 415-808-KNBR is the number. We will get into all of that as we discuss Giants baseball, a Giants team that is going for the series win in Miami on Wednesday. It'll send Keaton Winn to the mound on Wednesday. But man, they missed an opportunity tonight with the way that Jordan Hicks has thrown the ball, with the way that Hicks threw the ball in the first 3 innings tonight against the Marlins. They very well could have limited the damage in the 4th inning. And who knows, if Tyler Fitzgerald is able to get at least 1 out on that play, maybe that inning looks very different for Jordan Hicks. But he ends up having to throw 37 pitches, labors through it, ultimately only able to get through 5 innings tonight. And if you told me back at the beginning of spring training, if Jordan Hicks was going 5 innings, giving up 2 runs, I would have taken it. And if you told me coming into this game, Jordan Hicks gives up 5 innings or gives up 2 runs over 5 innings, again, would have taken it. This loss not on Jordan Hicks in the slightest. The offense doesn't pick him up. The defense doesn't pick him up. And now the Giants find themselves looking to battle to get out of this road trip with a 500 record, the Florida road trip. They haven't won a series in Miami all the way since 2016. So going on nearly a decade now if they lose tomorrow. And it's a Giants team that really needs to start showing a lot more at the plate. It's a Giants bullpen that, yes, has been better over the last 10 games, but tonight let one slip through the cracks. And the Giants, just fundamentally speaking, have not played good enough baseball over the last few weeks. They've run into some outs on the base paths. Tonight, it's Tyler Fitzgerald not able to make the fundamental turn at second base, stay on the bag, and it's mistakes like that that have compounded over the first 18 games for the Giants that have led them to this point where I totally understand the fan sentiment, the frustration that's out there, because there was so much excitement coming into this season, and for good reason. The Giants had overhauled the top end of their roster for the first time in the Farhan Zaidi era. It felt like the Giants were making moves that would put them in a position to potentially compete, contend, and they've got plenty of season to do that, but they've now dug themselves into this hole where they lose a series last week against the Nationals, they lose a series in Tampa Bay over the weekend against the Rays, and now, after having the opportunity to win on Tuesday night with their best pitcher so far this season on the mound, throwing well through the first 3 innings, they coughed this one up to the Miami Marlins, and it absolutely hurts them. So 415-808-KNBR is the number. Before we take our first break, we've already got someone on the line. We're going to head out to Fitz in Santa Cruz. Fitz in Santa Cruz, you're on Sports Phone. Fitz, how's it going this evening?
Kerry, how you doing, man?
Oh, doing well on my end. What's on your mind tonight, Fitz?
Man, I cannot help but be disappointed.
Yeah, I get it.
I didn't want to be disappointed because, the Giants and Farhan, they've done everything, it seems, that, the fans wanted them to do this offseason, with getting the big-name hitters, the big-name players. And, I know it's early in the season, it's a small sample size, but, man, I cannot help but be disappointed this early.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a game like this. It's a series like the one they played last week at home against the Washington Nationals that kind of hammers home the disappointment, Fitz, because to me, last year the Giants' shortcomings were they didn't beat the bad teams. They were a good enough roster. They brought up enough players to where, you had some semblance of hope, but then they'd get into these series against the Pirates, the Marlins, the Nationals, and they'd lose them. And it was confounding. And you thought that, hey, getting a Jordan Hicks here, getting a Matt Chapman, a Jorge Soler, a Blake Snell, that would rectify the issues. And then they lose the series last week to the Nationals at home. And now they lose tonight in a very winnable game against the Miami Marlins. And you're staring down a Wednesday with Keaton Winn going. And you feel like all of a sudden there's intense pressure on this guy to win this game because you can't keep digging this hole, right?
Right. Yeah. And I'm really torn because I love all the offseason moves. I love, hiring Bob Melvin, all the big name players they brought in. And, like you said, a series they should have won against the Nationals. If you had asked me, based on the lineup, they should have swept the Nationals.
Yeah.
But here we are. They lose the series against the Nationals. If you had asked me, they should sweep, Miami. But here we are, rubber match tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's just a really weird position to be in because, again, I absolutely love, and I'm sure there's tons of Giants fans, out there that love the offseason moves. We're finally making moves. And here we are. It's like, is it too early to be like, oh, here we go again?
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's a small sample size, but it's so hard to get that, out of the mind. Is that, okay, here we go again?
Yeah. And look, we don't want to say this in a 162 game season, Fitz, but first impressions, when you make as many changes as the Giants have this offseason, first impressions matter. And this first impression has not been good.
It's been terrible.
They've given a few reasons for optimism. They've given a semblance in some games of hope, but so much of this looks like a repeat of last year with different personnel, right?
Yeah, and as soon as they give you that, optimism where, it was, oh, we got 7 runs and then we scored 11 runs, it's like, oh, maybe we're turning around. And then the next game, it's like, oh, never mind.
Yeah, I know.
It's like, there we go again. And it's like,
it is.
I know this team is capable based on who we have. I know this team is capable of, the, 11-2, the 7-1, wins that they've had. But then and again, it's just so hard because I know it's a small sample size, but it's like they have these, flashes of greatness. And then the next game, it's like, oh, never mind. That's the Giants.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most frustrating part in my mind is, hey, you finally come back from a deficit last night. You finally show that, you get in an early hole. You can be scrappy. You can be gritty. You can line things up at the back end of the ball game. Camilo can get you the 4-out save when you need it. And then you get out to the early start and you don't build on that momentum against the worst or second worst team in the league, depending on what the Rockies look like right now. And so, Fitz, I appreciate the phone call. Thanks for your thoughts tonight. And look, if this happens again tomorrow, dial me up again for sure. We'll get to plenty of people out on the line tonight. 415-808-KNBR is the number. On the other side, want to talk about kind of the 3 biggest sources of frustration I've had with the first 18 games of the season, and Fitz with a good reminder there. Fitz down in Santa Cruz that, hey, it's still a small sample size. This still probably isn't representative of who the Giants could be, what they could become. You're still seeing guys, adjust to a new setting. Jorge Soler's on a different team. Matt Chapman's on a different team. Blake Snell pitching after not really pitching at all during spring training, and it's going to take time for the Giants to hit their groove, but you would have thought that they'd be closer to 500 through 18 games, maybe closer to 9-9 than 4 games under 500. And look, it's nothing that a hot stretch and good baseball can't take away and can't eliminate, but again, first impressions matter, and the Giants have not made a good one, and now they have to fight for a series win tomorrow against this lowly Miami Marlins team that just won its 4th game of the season. I'm Kerry Crowley. The show is Sports Zone KNBR. We are rolling with you until the end of Dubs Kings tonight up in Sacramento. That game getting going in just a moment. The winner of Warriors-Kings will face the New Orleans Pelicans on Friday as the Lakers take down the Pelicans 110-106 in the 7-8 game tonight. The Lakers had an 18-point lead in that one. The Pelicans came all the way back to tie, but it's LeBron, Anthony Davis, and the Lakers advancing. And so the Kings and the Warriors will get underway up in Sacramento in the 9-10 game. But in the 7-8 game, it's the lower seed that advances. It's the team that has the stars, the veterans, and tonight, the Warriors will, again, try to keep that theme going with the stars, the veterans, and the lower seed winning up in Sacramento against the Kings. So we'll have wall-to-wall coverage post-game later on this evening. For now, we're talking Giants baseball in the 7 o'clock hour, 8 o'clock hour. We'll look ahead to the 49ers and the NFL draft which starts next Thursday evening. Will the 49ers trade up? Will they trade Brandon Ayuk? Plenty of questions to address on tonight's show. I'm Kerry Crowley, the show Sports Phone KNBR. Your calls on the other side. You're listening. KNBR 104.5, 680, the sports leader.
Nighttime is the right time for Sports Phone KNBR. Let's go on the sports leader. Streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
Weathers delivers. Chapman a swing. There's a high, deep drive. Left center field. This one's heading way back. It is gone.
We are back. Kerry Crowley rolling with you until the end of Dubs Kings tonight, at which point John Dickinson and Greg Silver will take over from Sacramento live on the scene as the 9-10 play-in game takes place. Right now, 7 o'clock hour, we are breaking down this disappointing, frustrating, quite honestly, downright ugly 6-3 loss that the Giants suffered at the hands of the Miami Marlins earlier this evening. Giants really had an opportunity to build off of some momentum from Monday. They fall into an early 3-0 hole, come back, get that 4-3 win. A great show of toughness late. Tyro Estrada kind of ignites the offense on Monday evening. He gets the double to kick off that 3-run rally. Camilo Doval comes in for the 4-run save, and you're thinking, okay, the Marlins are 3-13. Jordan Hicks has taken the mound. He's been the Giants' best starter through the first 3 turns through the rotation. The Giants have an opportunity to finally take a series here, something that has evaded them for far too long now. And Jordan Hicks gets the run support he needs early. Matt Chapman with a big 428-foot home run. Wilmer Flores drives in a run in the 3rd inning. You're thinking, okay, the Giants can continue to get to Ryan Weathers. Jordan Hicks is rolling. And it all falls apart. We just detailed in the opening segment exactly how it fell apart. I'm sure many of our callers tonight will continue to pick at the things that frustrated them throughout tonight's game, but bottom line is this. The Giants waste an opportunity with Jordan Hicks on the mound. They lose 6-3, and now they head into Wednesday needing to win this getaway day rubber match against the lowly Miami Marlins, a team that really, quite frankly, is not trying to win many ball games this year. They're playing for the future. So 415-808-KNBR is the number. Your thoughts on the loss, your frustration level with the San Francisco Giants right now. Let's go out to Rick in Dublin. Rick in Dublin, you're on Sports Phone. Rick, how's it going this evening?
Everything's okay except for the Giants.
I think that's well said. Well said, Rick.
Yeah. No, I'm just kind of wondering, I love Melvin. I love his coaching staff, especially Coach Price. I think he's a great pitching coach and a damn good manager. But, we got a guy named Dusty Baker who's in our system. And, at what point how far do we have to get behind before we have to catch up? And how far are they going to let us fall behind before there's some kind of changes?
Are you talking about a change in manager? Is that what you're suggesting here, Rick?
Leadership on the field.
Okay. I don't see that happening in 2024. I could see a scenario where the Giants fall behind so far in the standings that they make a change at the front office level. Like if this becomes a worst case scenario, the Giants fail in April, fail in May, and they're just completely out of it by June and July. I could see the Giants making an early move and saying, you've got to change the leadership in the front office because it'll be yet another season in which they're destined to miss the postseason. But Bob Melvin just signed a 3-year contract, and this is not an ownership group that is going to go back on that anytime soon. Whether you like it, whether I like it, I think that they're at least going to give him the season.
I think the front office did a great offseason. I mean,
I do too.
We spent money in right situations, in right positions. We got all the chips there. It didn't work in San Diego, and they all blame, money can't buy everything. Well, money bought a lot of smart positions here. I mean, not just blowout money. It was smart positions. I feel the front office did a heck of a job, and, when you're the captain of the ship, you can't make you can't make magic, but something's got to happen before we fall behind too far.
I understand it. And thank you for the call, Rick. I don't see the Giants doing anything dramatic in this first season of Bob Melvin's tenure. I can get that, maybe you weren't one of the folks who wanted him installed as the manager after they fired Gabe Kapler at the end of last season. There were a few other names out there, but this is an organization that wanted to ultimately restore that connection to the community. Bob Melvin from the Bay Area, played for the Giants, rooted for the Giants growing up. It seemed like the right fit at the time, and I'm going to give him time. I don't think this is on Melvin right now. I actually don't even think that this is on the front office right now. I do think that this is on the players. And some of it is guys in new situations. Some of it is guys feeling out their new roles under a new coaching staff and a new manager, a new leader in Bob Melvin. But the bottom line is this. At some point, 7-11 could get significantly worse. And if it does, there will be change. Right now, it's not the time to call for that type of dramatic change. I think you give at least 2 months into the season before you start thinking about something truly dramatic like that. Right now, I think this is a vent session. Get your thoughts out on the San Francisco Giants, the state of the team, what you'd like to see change that is realistic to change over the next 4 to 6 weeks before we really start taking stock of this team around Memorial Day weekend. Let's go to Don in San Francisco. Don in San Francisco, you're on Sports Zone. Don, how's it going this evening? We lose Don there? Oh, Don, we may have you back. Oh, let's skip Don for the moment. Kyle, let's make a reconnection with Don there. 415-808 KNBR is the number. Let's go to caller one. Caller one there.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
This is Don.
Oh, there we go, Don. Okay, now we've made the connection with you, Don. How are you?
Okay. Oh, just okay. I'm just kind of concerned about the Giants. I hope they don't get too far behind. That's what my concern is about.
Yeah, I think that the way that they're playing now does not look like it's going to add up to a team that can contend with the Dodgers or can contend at the top of the National League right now. Don, what's the biggest concern that you've seen through the first 18 games this season?
What I've seen the pitching was doing good, but the hitting is just not coming around like I expected to come around.
Yeah.
Like I expect it to, but I expect it to come. The pitching does good, but I just see the hitting coming around right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Thank you for the call, and it's a good jumping off point for us because the end of tonight's game, the Giants are 7-11. They lose 6-3 to the woeful Miami Marlins, and you look up and down the lineup. Austin Slater, the leadoff man tonight, 449 OPS right now, a 133 batting average. Wilmer Flores, who is in the two-hole tonight, a 250 batting average, a 626 OPS. Jung-Hoo Lee, who I am optimistic about this season, 257 average, 637 OPS. You keep going further down the order, and the numbers aren't good. In fact, outside of Michael Conforto and Patrick Bailey, there's no consistent starter for this team who's been better than league average at the plate. And so philosophically, something is going to need to change at the plate for the Giants to, reframe their approach, stop taking as many first pitch strikes, be more aggressive early on in counts. Think a little bit more fastball centric, even though teams are throwing them a ton of breaking balls right now. I do think that there are things that need to change, and I think that a lot of it in my mind is an approach thing and the way the Giants are coming into these at bats, because what we've seen the last two nights, striking out 10 times against Edward Cabrera, striking out 10 times against Ryan Weathers tonight, that's not acceptable. So let's go out to Mike in San Francisco. Mike in San Francisco, you're on Sports Phone. Mike, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. What's on your mind tonight?
I was just thinking about some of the things you were talking about and the callers were talking about, putting it together and thinking we've got the top of the lineup that's been with us for 4 years now, and wondering if they have enough fight in them to come back in a ball game here in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings anymore.
Yeah.
Because we've got, the top of the lineup hasn't changed in that long. And it hasn't been pretty. But some of the positives, I think we have one of the best pitching staffs to come in Giants history.
Okay.
With Jordan Hicks and Harrison and Webb and Doval and it's the whole staff I'm looking at. But what I wonder, just to play devil's advocate, because I usually go down with the ship and lean in here, is
I like where you're going.
Is Brandon Belt worth a re-signing, considering how well he's played?
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, Mike, and thank you for the call. I like the idea because initially when I heard that someone wanted to bring up the idea of Brandon Belt, I thought, no, it doesn't make sense for a Giants team that has its best position player right now with Lamont Wade Jr., what he's done so far at first base. Guy's hitting well over 300. The OPS is up over 1,000. You're not going to bring in a first baseman, and especially with the fact that you're platooning there with Wilmer Flores against left-handed pitchers as well. So you've got two of the hitters that historically have been most reliable for you. Lamont's off to a good start. Wilmer, you figure will come around. He had a good night last night, and he did have the double tonight despite ending the game with the pop-out. But there is a scenario here where if the Giants don't get things going in right field with Mike Yastrzemski and Austin Slater, you potentially move Wade to the outfield, and you sacrifice a little bit of defense, and you say, okay, let's see what you have. If you get to May and things aren't working out, what if you did sign Brandon Belt to a minor league deal just to see if he could get ready in 2 or 3 weeks down at AAA Sacramento? What if you did, float that idea around? Because I don't know that there are a ton of players in this Giants farm system who are ready to take on an everyday role in the outfield. Luis Matos, yes, he had a great spring and 2 home runs with his first game with the Sacramento Rivercats, but since that point, he's hit under 200. I love Elliot Ramos. I think Elliot Ramos should be in the big leagues for the Giants. I think that he's the one player who's consistently produced at AAA Sacramento. But this front office doesn't love Elliot Ramos. This front office has clearly shown us the way that they value him by optioning him consistently, by never giving him a true shot in the big league. And the reality is he was someone who was drafted by the previous regime, and he was someone who I thought could have been traded this offseason. And so if an injury happens, they'll go with Ramos probably being the first call-up in the outfield right now. But I like that call about Brandon Belt because I don't think it's as far-fetched as I once thought. They're clearly comfortable moving Lamont Wade Jr. to the outfield. If he plays left, if he plays right, you could foresee a scenario where if you really desperately need a bat in May or June and Brandon Belt still doesn't have a home, why not get him into AAA, see if you can get him going, and figure something out there? Crazier things have happened. I don't think it's likely. I don't think the Giants have reached out at all as far as I know, but you at least have to consider something like that. Let's go to our friend Roy in San Leandro. Roy in San Leandro, you're on Sports Zone. Roy, how's it going this evening?
Oh, pretty good. How you doing? How's it going?
Oh, always doing well, especially when we hear your voice. What's on your mind tonight, Roy?
Basically, I just wanted to say, I enjoy all of the callers tonight, and plus you, because you certainly know what you're talking about. But I just wanted to say, in this year's amateur draft, what do you think not 49ers, but, well, the 49ers too, but the Giants, wow, what do you think the Giants are going to be looking for? Because don't the Giants have something like 3 selections?
Yeah, the Giants gave up a few selections, Roy, so they really have to hit their first-round pick. And thank you for the call, because I will tell you, 8 o'clock hour tonight, we will be doing the 49ers draft. So if you stick around for that, I'll tell you all about my thoughts on the 49ers draft. But this year, the Giants have sacrificed a comp pick by signing Blake Snell. They've sacrificed a pick by signing Matt Chapman. And so they are hamstrung a little bit in terms of what they will get in the amateur draft come June, or maybe it's July now. I don't know. I think it's now part of All-Star Weekend. Obviously, the Major League Baseball draft isn't the type of event like the NFL draft where you're glued to the TV for 3 days, the NBA draft where you watch all the lottery picks. MLB draft is very different. But you look at the state of the Giants farm system right now, and I see a lot of pitchers who can come up and potentially help this team. And I see a lot of guys who, hey, maybe they're a starter, maybe they're a reliever, but they've got a future at the Major League level. I don't feel that way about the hitters in the farm system, and I haven't felt that way about the hitters in the farm system for the last 5-10 years. And that's the reason we're talking about a Giants team that's 7-11 and had to go out and spend so much money on free agents this offseason, because it is a team that just has not consistently found hitters in the draft since the World Series era who can come up to the big leagues and make an impact. Maybe the best hitter the Giants have brought up, drafted the guy as Brian Reynolds, but they traded him away. I'm talking about the best, most impactful hitter that they've brought up through their farm system in the last 6-7 seasons. It's probably Austin Slater. And because that's the case, that's not good enough. That's not to disrespect Austin Slater, who's been a valuable platoon bat, but you need to find starters in the draft. You need to find everyday players in the draft. You need to find consistent position players who can be your leadoff hitter, who can be your 2 hitter, who can be your 5 and 6 guy. Maybe you go out on the free agent market and you find your 3 and 4 hitter. That's fine. But the Giants have not done a good enough job developing in-house talent, and it's why they're taking risks in the free agent market, and sometimes those risks don't pay off. Let's go out to Zach in Concord. Zach in Concord, you're on Sports Phone. Zach, how's it going this evening?
Harry, what's going on, man?
Not much. What's on your mind tonight?
Hey, man, this is coming from a passionate Giants fan. Like, I am upset at the Giants' struggles right now. And all I gotta say is this: Yaz and Slater, I'm pretty sure they're batting below 200.
Yeah, they are.
We need to call somebody up or make a move. I don't know. Someone can definitely hit higher than 220 in right field. I'm sure we can find somebody.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I totally agree, and I appreciate the phone call. Thank you for the call. We had to cut you off there because you're out on the road. We want you to stay safe. But it's funny because I just throw out this idea. We get the call from one of our callers just a few minutes ago who says, hey, what about the idea of bringing back Brandon Belt? And this is something that at the beginning of the season I was opposed to. I thought, hey, the door is shut. You move forward. You don't need anything. Bringing up from the past and these nostalgic moments that the Giants have had the last few seasons, it's just time to move forward. But you look 18 games into the year, and you look in the outfield, and everyone's main source of frustration right now is the fact that the Giants aren't getting any production from Mike Yastrzemski and Austin Slater. And that's an issue for this team. Right field has not been good through 18 games. They'll give him 40. They'll give him 50 games to figure it out. But everyone then wants to turn to the farm system. Like our last caller just said, hey, let's go to the farm system and bring someone up. Well, the problem is that the Giants don't really have anyone ready to take over in right field. And so you've got guys who are hitting under 200 in the majors, guys in the farm system at AAA who might not hit 200 in the majors. And so we got a slew of texts saying, 707, no, the Giants already have enough guys who strike out. 559, we do not need Belt back for any possible reason. The guy, as far as I know, was an above average major league hitter last year. You check his baseball reference page, he's pretty good for the Toronto Blue Jays. And so I'm saying if you get to May, if you get to June, and this is still an issue, you sign into a minor league deal. You think about the idea of moving Lamont Wade Jr. to the outfield because Lamont Wade Jr. has been one of your better players, and then you find someone who actually can be a productive major league hitter. Now, the best case scenario for the Giants is Austin Slater or Mike Yastrzemski will turn it on. They'll look like they did in previous seasons, and they'll end up being at least average major league hitters, and the Giants lineup will recover from this point. Another scenario, hey, maybe it doesn't work out for them, and you bring up someone from the farm system. Maybe it's Elliot Ramos. Maybe he finally gets his opportunity. Maybe it's Luis Matos. Maybe he's able to play for you down the stretch this season and be a really productive player. But right now, the Giants aren't in a position where they can dig into the farm system and just have a ready-made replacement. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, the Giants haven't brought up many players in the last, 8-10 years, position players, who've been plug-and-play guys who you feel comfortable with at any position. And so if your solution is to turn to the farm system, I don't know. I question that, and I think that that's a big issue, not just for the previous regime, but now that it's year, 6 for Farhan Zaidi, it's become a big issue for him that he and his player development staff have not put the Giants in a position to bring guys up for the minor league system who can make an impact, who can fill in. And I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic about Luis Matos. I think that he will be a great major leaguer one day, but he's 22 years old. I wish they gave Elliot Ramos a chance, but they haven't. They've been pretty clear that this guy is not a priority for them. So where do you turn? Wade Meckler? I don't know, but please do give me a call. 415-808-KNBR is the number. On the other side, more thoughts on Giants baseball, your primary sources of frustration through 18 games so far this season. Love the text line lighting up right now. Warriors underway in Sacramento. We will keep you updated as they try to keep their season alive tonight up against the Kings at Golden One. John Dickinson and Greg Silver later on this evening will host Dubs OT. You hope it's not the last one of the year. So on the other side, we'll keep you updated on that game and what's transpired so far in Sacramento. As we talk Giants in the 7 o'clock hour, 49ers in the 8 o'clock hour. We'll bring you around Major League Baseball in the 9 o'clock hour. I'm Kerry Crowley. The show is Sports on KNBR. You're listening to KNBR 104.5, 680, the sports leader.
We want your reaction, so give us a ring or blow up the text line at 415-808-KNBR. This is Sports Phone KNBR, streaming live at twitch.tv/the Sports Leader.
We give up some runs there, especially in the sixth. So, not Walk's best day. He's pretty reliable for us. Once it's a tie game, we feel pretty good about bringing him in there, but every now and then you're going to have an off outing.
Yeah, I agree with Bob Melvin that Ryan Walker was probably the right guy to go to in the sixth inning after Jordan Hicks grinded his way through 5, giving up just 2 runs despite needing to throw 37 pitches in a marathon 4th inning, which his defense did him no favors. But when your off day is against the Marlins, that's a really off day. Tough one for Ryan Walker, even tougher one for the San Francisco Giants, who waste an opportunity against the Marlins. They've not yet won this series. They'll have an opportunity to do so on Wednesday with Keaton Wynn taking the mound. You hope that fastball split combination can work wonders against this Marlins lineup that the Giants failed to contain tonight. They go for 6. Luis Arraez hits the bases loaded 2-run single off Taylor Rogers in the 6th inning, and that does the Giants in. They weren't able to recover. It's not an offense that, despite last night's ball game, has proven that it can consistently come back. And yes, we're talking about an 18-game sample size, so it's not significant. It is not that big, but again, there's sources of frustration. I get them. 415-808-KNBR is the number. I'm Kerry Crowley. The show is Sports Zone KNBR. Keep dialing in this evening. We got some good texts over the break as well. 707 mentioned this because I said, look, I don't think this front office is invested in Elliot Ramos. They've had opportunities to call him up before, had an opportunity to give him significant playing time during spring training, and they didn't do it. And so 707 says, if they don't call up Ramos, move Lamont Wade Jr. to right field, call up Casey Schmidt, and put him at first base. Well, I like the idea, even if Schmidt's not a first baseman. He's really a third, shortstop, second baseman, utility infielder. But, hey, if you can learn all those positions, first base may not be as challenging. And Casey Schmidt is the one guy down at AAA right now who's on a heater. He's hit like 4 home runs in his last 13 at-bats. I think he has 9 hits in his last 13 at-bats. He is the one guy who, when he gets hot, you kind of want him at the major league level to take advantage of that. My question is, can he do it consistently over the course of a few weeks? Can he do it consistently over the course of a 162-game season? And is he more than a quadruple A player? There's still questions about Casey Schmidt's bat and its viability long-term at the big league level, if he'll be more than a utility man. And if you get to May, if you get to June, the Giants might have to answer those questions. Because what they've gotten out of their right fielders so far, what they've gotten out of other spots in their lineup so far, simply not good enough. And so whatever configuration it takes for Farhan Zaidi and Bob Melvin to squeeze more offense out of this lineup, I'm down to experiment. I'm down to see them try it. And I think that, that's what they ought to be doing at AAA, is getting guys in position to learn as many positions, to come up to the big leagues and help them. So not a crazy off-the-wall idea there from 707, because this is a Giants team that is in desperate need of some offensive help. 415 chiming in on the fact that I was discussing earlier the Giants and their inability to draft players who ultimately make a difference at the major league level, especially position players. It's something that Brian Sabian and Bobby Evans struggled with. After they brought up Buster Posey, Brandon Crawford, Brandon Belt, Pablo Sandoval, all the players who contributed to the World Series runs, really from about 2013 to 2024, the Giants have really struggled to hit on first, second, and third round draft picks. Patrick Bailey looks like he can be a guy who ends that streak. The 2020 first round pick looks like he can be someone who can consistently start for you for a decade. But again, you want to find guys through the draft who are really impactful players. And the reason the Giants tailed off after the 2016 season is they just didn't find replacements for all the players who'd come through their farm system and contributed to those World Series squads. And they're still very much struggling to find those position players. 415 on the text line said, look at the very first couple of drafts Farhan Zaidi had. He loves plate discipline, but when you're talking about high school ball, college ball, it's easy. And it doesn't translate to the professional level. And I do think there's a bit of truth in that. I don't know that plate discipline would be a real top priority for me if I was sitting in a front office. And I said this last night. I've said it on many shows, and I'll say it again tonight. I'll never be in a front office. I'll never be in a position to make those type of calls. But there are other things that I think that the Giants should value ahead of plate discipline, because it's clearly not a strategy that has gotten them all that far. And you look at their plate discipline this season, and they're being too disciplined on pitches down the middle. They're not swinging at those. Grant Brisbee of The Athletic wrote an article highlighting the issues that the Giants have had taking pitches over the middle of the plate. They've taken more pitches over the heart of the plate than just about any other team this season. And, you figure that those stats normalize over the course of the year, but there are too many times the Giants are striking out looking. And it's gotten to the point where it's really confounding. And there are some at-bats that just look non-competitive. And even if they aren't striking out looking, they're taking a lot of first pitch strikes down the middle. I think that the book is out right now on the Giants' offensive approach, and other pitchers are seizing on this. You can flip a get-me-in breaking ball over the middle of the plate, and a Giants hitter might not swing because they might be sitting dead red fastball. And if they don't get that pitch, then they're content to take it. And so once you get behind in the count, your odds of getting a hit drop significantly. The difference is massive in Major League Baseball. And the Giants so often through the first 18 games this season have found themselves way behind in the count. And it just doesn't feel like there's enough players in this lineup who are unleashing on the first pitch. And, maybe that's, too free swinging of a mindset. Maybe the Giants' goal is to drive up the pitch count of the starter. But where has that gotten them through 18 games? As far as I've seen, last night, Edward Cabrera, tonight, Ryan Weathers, they're still able to get through 5-6 innings, throwing few pitches and striking out double-digit hitters. Both of those guys struck out 10 against the San Francisco Giants, and that's simply not good enough. It's not going to cut it for this team, and so a lot needs to change for the Giants in that regard. And I know that the volume of calls and the volume of texts is going to dip as we head into the 8 o'clock hour, as more folks get home, get off the road, and focus on the Golden State Warriors. But if you were frustrated, folks, by the Giants' performance this evening in Miami, the early returns on the Warriors up in Sacramento have not been good. We'll try to do quarterly updates, keep you updated every 10, 15 minutes or so. But the Warriors right now down 36-22 in the second quarter, the Sacramento Kings. They were outscored by 9 in the first quarter, and they have not yet scored in the second quarter. 9:48 to go. It's 36-22. Of course, the winner of this game will advance to take on the New Orleans Pelicans on Friday evening at the Smoothie King Center in New Orleans. As earlier tonight, the Los Angeles Lakers pick up a 110-106 victory over the Pelicans. So the 8th-seeded Lakers get that win. They had an 18-point lead over the Pelicans. The Pelicans fought all the way back in the third quarter and tied up that ball game, but the Lakers ultimately emerge with that win. LeBron James had 23 points to lead the Los Angeles Lakers. Zion Williamson soared 40 points, 11 rebounds for the Pelicans tonight on 17 of 27 shooting. What a night for Zion Williamson, as Brandon Ingram only scored 11, and so the Pelicans will meet the winner of this 9-10 matchup, the Kings and the Warriors, of course, up in Sacramento right now. So we'll continue to give you updates on that ball game. As for now, 7 o'clock hour here on KNBR, we're going to keep things focused on the San Francisco Giants. We'll reset a little bit, discussing tonight's ball game, a 6-3 loss in disappointing fashion to the Miami Marlins. And I want to kind of discuss my main sources of frustration. And it's this. The three biggest sources of frustration: the lineup is striking out too much and taking too many pitches. Just addressed how I think that there are far too many first pitch strikes coming right over the heart of the plate the Giants are hitting. Number two, the Giants went out and they did great work this offseason, in my opinion. I think that ownership committed resources. Farhan Zaidi identified talented Major League free agents to bring in, and the Giants brought in a prized free agent class. Maybe one of the best classes the Giants have ever brought in free agency. And yet, through 18 games, it's been a really slow start to the season. And we could have anticipated a slow start for Jung-Hoo Lee, but you would have hoped that Jorge Soler and Matt Chapman would be helping to carry this lineup in a way that, hey, maybe the Giants didn't have players who could carry the lineup last season. Maybe that's why they fell apart in July, August, and September. And right now, Matt Chapman, even with the home run tonight, a 667 OPS. Jorge Soler, with 2 strikeouts and 4 at-bats tonight, a 751 OPS. And Soler's been helped by the fact that he has 3 home runs this season, but he has also struck out a whole lot. And at least the last 2 evenings against Edward Cabrera and against Ryan Weathers tonight, Jorge Soler took some uncompetitive at-bats, and he really looked flummoxed against these Marlins starters. He's someone who the Giants were really hoping could get hot against this Tampa Bay Rays team and then, figure out a way to get back into his home ballpark from last season where he, felt comfortable enough to hit 36 home runs for the Miami Marlins. Of course, many of those came on the road, but hitting in Miami did not prevent Soler from having a down season, and the Giants have not gotten much from him the first 2 games of this series. Of course, Jordan Hicks has been great, but on the flip side of that, Blake Snell, through his first 2 outings, has not for this Giants team. So when the Giants get home against the Arizona Diamondbacks, they're hoping to see much more from Blake Snell. It's just one of those situations where you sign him late in the spring, a pitcher doesn't have a lot of time to ramp up. You can't expect much the first few times out, but now the crunch is on. Now Blake Snell has to start earning that contract that the Giants are paying him a massive amount of money to, make great starts for this team. And yes, through his first 5 starts with the Padres last year, his ERA was above 5, and he ultimately brought that down to a 2.25 ERA to lead the National League last season, win the Cy Young. But the Giants need him to turn it around in his 3rd start of the season against the Diamondbacks. So I think that second source of frustration is the slow starts for the players that the Giants acquired. I think we all had higher expectations for them. And now the third source of frustration is just the Giants' inability to beat bad teams. I remember sitting here last year doing a post-game show early in the season after the Giants lost to the Detroit Tigers. And they lost in brutal fashion. They gave up the lead, and you said, hey, it's April. Sure, it's the Detroit Tigers. Sure, the Tigers aren't trying to win this year, but it's a long season, and you're going to win more than you lose if you play teams like the Tigers and you play them competitive. Well, ultimately last year, the Giants missed the playoffs because they didn't beat teams like the Tigers, because they lost series to the Tigers, the Nationals, the Marlins, the Royals. The list goes on and on. They lost a series to the Rockies late in the season that was just utterly confounding. And right now, the Giants' start has been a little reminiscent of what we saw last season, You say last week, hey, it's early. You can lose a series to the Washington Nationals and still recover. But when you lose that series at home, and then you lose a winnable game tonight like the one they played in Miami against a really bad Marlins team that's not trying to win this year, and you go into a situation like tomorrow where you have to win to get the series victory, puts a lot of pressure on everyone. And 18 games into the season, I think the players, I think the coaching staff, I think the manager and Bob Melvin, and I think the front office are all feeling more pressure than anyone anticipated to feel in the month of April. Because you add these big names, you add these marquee talents, and you think, okay, the Giants are going to find a way, and they'll be better than last season. They will be in a situation where you can anticipate them being competitive and in the race over the course of 162. But right now, it's a Giants team that has ground to make up already in the National League. And fortunately, they've got, 148 games to make up that ground? So they'll be fine in that regard. Or 146 games to make up that ground, so they'll be fine in that regard. But you'd like to see a little more inspired play. You'd like to see more competitive at-bats. And you'd like to see 1 or 2 of these big free agent position players the Giants sign really get hot. You would have thought it would have happened on this road trip. It hasn't so far. And now the Giants head into Wednesday needing to beat the Miami Marlins to feel at least halfway decent about the way they played when they left Oracle Park and before they come home for a quick turnaround on Thursday against the Arizona Diamondbacks. When we come back, going to flip gears, talk about the San Francisco 49ers a week out from the NFL draft, and there's some interesting moves the 49ers could make. Brandon Ayuk in the news, Brock Purdy on with Pat McAfee earlier today. We'll play a few of those cuts for you as well. I'll talk about why I think the 49ers ought to move up in this year's NFL draft, even if they don't have a great history of nailing those picks with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan in charge. The show is Sports Zone KNBR. Your calls welcome all evening long. 415-808-KNBR is the number. You're listening to KNBR 104.5, 680, the sports leader.
is Sports Phone KNBR. Dial the digits or send us a text at 415-808-KNBR. We're streaming on YouTube all damn day at KNBR 1045.
The other major thing to look for would be Brandon Ayuk. You know, I do think that they will get something done with him eventually, but just as we talked about 2 years ago around this time with Deebo Samuel, you know, the first round of the draft is kind of key. You know, you never know where things are going. I would be really surprised if the 49ers don't try to make this thing work with Brandon Ayuk, that they don't, ultimately arrive at a long-term solution for him. But it's going to take a little bit of time. But I think everybody can kind of breathe easy once the first round of the NFL draft comes and goes and Brandon Ayuk is still on the team. So that would be really, the only way something's going to happen, I think, with Brandon Ayuk as far as him not remaining with the 49ers would have to be some sort of blockbuster trade on day one of the NFL draft.
We are back here on Sports Phone KNBR. Kerry Crowley rolling with you until the end of Dubs Kings tonight. John Dickinson and Greg Silver will have a special post-game show from Golden One as the Warriors are in action in the play-in game. We'll keep you updated around halftime of that one with the latest score update. Well, thank our producer Kyle and our sound editor Kyle this evening. We have Kyle Haar, Kyle Chung in the studio tonight. Casey Copeland's around working on the Warriors game as well. So we've got a full studio, keeping you updated, getting you prepped for tomorrow's shows on KNBR. And hey, I'm just here filling the next hour and a half. And we're going to spend it doing a lot of 49ers talk. Sports Phone KNBR is presented by Industrial Metal Supply online at industrialmetalsupply.com. It's metal made easy. And we are now 9 days from the start of the NFL draft. There's been discussions all off season long, rumors, murmurs, speculation, whatever you want to call it, around the 49ers wide receiver one, Brandon Ayuk. And anytime I call him that, there's always a few people who are quick to point out, hey, isn't Deebo wide receiver one? Isn't he the guy who the 49ers feature more on offense? And to me, it's the guy who went for 1,300 plus yards last year and who's now gone over 1,000 yards receiving in each of the last two seasons. I think that he is the more reliable, true wide receiver. Now, Deebo has an extraordinary value to the 49ers offense, and the fact that the 49ers can flex him in multiple different ways is tremendous for Kyle Shanahan, what Brock Purdy and Kyle want to accomplish on the offensive side of the football. But I mention all of this to say that there's this assumption that because the 49ers have paid so many guys, George Kittle's gotten his contract, Fred Warner's gotten his contract, Nick Bosa's gotten his contract, Christian McCaffrey, that there's not enough room left to pay Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, and to pay them both like wide receiver ones. And now that Deebo's been paid a few years ago, Brandon Ayuk, it's his turn. And can the 49ers afford both of those contracts on their books? I think the answer is yes. And I think the answer is yes in 2024, but I do think the answer might be no in 2025. And what that looks like, whether it's sacrificing money from another portion of the roster and keeping both of those players, or if it's ultimately trading Deebo or Ayuk after this season, I don't know. But I am convinced, at least personally speaking, that the 49ers will keep Brandon Ayuk around for 2024. And I'm going to lay out the reasons here. And if you disagree, feel free, call in, dial in, 415-808-KNBR is the number. But then I'm going to play devil's advocate for my own argument with regard to Brandon Ayuk. The reason I'm convinced that he'll remain with the San Francisco 49ers is because he's a former first-round draft pick who Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have invested more than just draft capital into. They have gone from this guy being Kyle's doghouse, from him struggling to get reps in the 2022 season, to him being a featured part, a critical part of this 49ers offense, and maybe the most reliable guy for Brock Purdy. And I say maybe because, Christian McCaffrey, always available on the check down. But if you're talking about someone 10, 15, 20 yards down the field, Brandon Ayuk is the 49ers' best route runner. He is their fastest wide receiver, and he is someone who I think Brock Purdy relies on to open up this passing game. And so I think you'd be doing a great disservice to a young quarterback by breaking up that relationship, entering what could be the final year of this 49ers championship window. I don't know what 2025 holds, but my sense tells me that this might be the last great year with the current roster construction as is for the 49ers to take a shot at winning a Super Bowl. That's not to say they won't be competitive in future seasons. I just don't know that they'll be Super Bowl caliber level after the 2024 season. And if you keep Ayuk, I think you are. If you don't keep Ayuk, I think that you're taking and running a huge risk, a major gamble, because you'd be trading him and you would ultimately have to find a productive, immediate plug-and-play replacement in the first round of this NFL draft. And, you read all the reports, and all the draft experts tell me that this is a great year to get a wide receiver. Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State is going to go top 5 in a quarterback-heavy top 5. Malik Neighbors of LSU, there's some folks who like him better than Marvin Harrison Jr. Rome Odunze out of Washington. I mean, the guy was practically in the Heisman race for parts of this season with the Huskies, and he could go in the top 10. Then you've got Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU, Adonai Mitchell out of Texas, Lad McConkey out of Georgia. He could be a first-round draft pick. The bottom line is there are 5 or 6 guys who could be first-round draft picks. Now, that means that there could be other teams looking to get their wide receiver 1, namely the Buffalo Bills, a team that's still looking for that guy. The Cincinnati Bengals are looking to pair someone with Jamar Chase. They might find someone in the middle of the first round that they like. And I think there's teams toward the top of the draft that will ultimately capitalize on the fact that you've got Harrison, you've got Neighbors, and you've got a number of other players, including Rome Odunze, who you could take in the top 10 and feel good moving forward. That means that the 49ers, by the time that 31 comes around, may be left with a second-tier wide receiver, because there are so many teams looking to capitalize and looking to find that wide receiver 1 right now that, in a deep wide receiver draft, would they be willing to give up a first-round pick to sign Brandon Ayuk to a long-term contract when they could get a wide receiver, potentially one who is just as productive on a rookie deal? I don't know. I think that would be a risk for those teams. And so, to me, I'm convinced the 49ers are going to keep Brandon Ayuk, sign him to a long-term deal, and his value may have just gone up with Devontae Smith of the Eagles signing a 3-year, $75 million contract earlier this week. His value may have just gone up because of that, but also because I think that there are teams who just feel as if they can get their receiver in the first round of this year's draft and feel good moving forward and feel like they don't have to overpay someone who's already gone for 2,000-yard seasons. And those teams would be running a risk, sure, because there are no sure bets in the NFL draft. But for teams who are conscious about the cap and wanting to, mold someone into their system without paying them an exorbitant amount of money and giving up a first-round pick to do so, it feels like this is a good year for teams in that position to just take a guy and not worry about executing a trade with the 49ers. And the 49ers, I think, should read the writing on the wall, understand how important Ayuk is to what they're trying to do, and keep him around, keep him happy, and give this one more good run in 2024. Now, with all of that being said, play devil's advocate here for a moment. I think it's well within reason to see all the first-round picks, all the guys, I think 6 or 7 players who grade out as first-round wide receivers. If you're the 49ers, say, hey, we're going to eventually have to make some tough decisions with regard to the salary cap. Wouldn't you want to get a head start on that and bring in someone who could be an immediate impact player? If there really truly are 5 or 6 receivers with first-round grades, if one slips the 49ers at 31, would you draft him and then trade Ayuk? Would you execute a trade to move into the early 20s and get someone that you really like and trade Ayuk? I think that's well within reason. And so I'm not closing off the door. I'm not shutting the door on the idea that the 49ers could move him next Thursday, as we heard Matt Maiocco say on the way into this segment. But I do think they'd be running a risk, and I do think the safer move is to play for a play for a Super Bowl title, run it back in 2024, and worry about the cap obligations, worry about the future in the future. So we shall see. We shall see what the 49ers ultimately opt to do. That is the Ayuk segment that I wanted to get to here on Sports Phone. What I want to do next, when we come back, is cover who I think the 49ers could ultimately take in the first round and the direction I think they'll go and why I do think they could and should be comfortable moving up. And maybe not moving up more than a spot or two, maybe not more than 4 or 5 spots in the first round of this NFL draft. But I do think that, for a team that is so intent on competing for a Super Bowl title and getting back to having an opportunity to win a Lombardi trophy after coming up short against the Kansas City Chiefs twice in a span of 5 seasons, there's a reason it makes sense to move up this year. So on the other side, we'll break that decision down. We'll keep you updated on scores around Major League Baseball, and we will keep this show rolling. Sports Phone KNBR is presented by Industrial Metal Supply. Online at industrialmetalsupply.com. It's metal made easy. I'm Kerry Crowley, rolling with you until the end of Dubs Kings. We'll keep you updated on that game, which is headed to halftime very shortly on the other side. You're listening. KNBR 104.5, 680, the sports leader.
Sound off on the sports leader. Sports phone KNBR keeps rolling right here and on the all-new KNBR app.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're looking for where the 49ers pick, you know, they pick late in the first round, late in the second round. And, yeah, I think, you know, all things being equal, I'm sure they would love to get an offensive lineman with that first pick, and then maybe a defense or defensive back, cornerback specifically with the second pick. But, you know, it all just kind of matters on how it all shakes out.
That was NBC Sports Bay Area insider Matt Mayoko discussing the 49ers' approach to the NFL draft, which starts next Thursday evening. The 49ers with a first-round pick this year. So, of course, plenty of intrigue, plenty of interest, and plenty of discussion surrounding what they do with wide receiver Brandon Ayuk. Do they extend him right now? Could Ayuk be traded on draft day to a team that ultimately wants to give him an extension? And if that's the case, would the 49ers then use a first-round pick that they acquire in a potential deal to pick another wide receiver to ultimately be Ayuk's replacement? So plenty of different scenarios going down, and I'll discuss what I think is the most likely scenario in just a moment. Matt Mayoko on the right track there. Of course, you'd expect that from one of the foremost insiders in Bay Area sports on the 49ers, but I have a little twist on that I'd like to get to. But first, we'll keep you updated on this Kings-Warriors game up in Sacramento right now. The Kings 54, the Warriors 50 at the half right now. Warriors were down by as many as 14 points, 36-22, but they rallied back. Jonathan Kuminga, Brandon Pajemski, Moses Moody, important minutes for this team early in the ball game. So far, Jonathan Kuminga leading the Warriors with 12 points on 5 of 11 from the field. He's been very aggressive. Steph Curry, just 5 first-half points. So this is not a redo of last year's Game 7 in the first round of the NBA postseason, where Steph Curry scored 50 in Game 7 against the Kings up at Golden 1. He has just 5 right now. Keegan Murray leading the way for the Sacramento Kings, really hurting the Warriors. 16 points for the Kings, 3. Domantas Sabonis, 10 points, and De'Aaron Fox, 10 points as well. So balanced scoring across the board for the top players on the Kings roster. Klay Thompson goes 0 for 5 in the first half, 0 for 3 from beyond the arc. Steph Curry hits just 1 three-pointer. And so the fact that the Warriors are within 4 right now, all things considered, look, I've been hosting this show. I haven't been paying that close attention to the game. All things considered, when that's the stat line, you have to feel okay. You may not feel okay trailing in a do-or-die game where your season ends tonight if you lose, but the Warriors know what's at stake, and they can fully anticipate Steph Curry and Klay Thompson having better second halves. At least, they anticipate that. Whether or not it happens will ultimately dictate what their season looks like tomorrow, and if there is still a season tomorrow. So all of that is to say, That's our Warriors update. We will keep you posted. And John Dickinson up in Sacramento, he'll have the post-game show tonight, taking your calls on Dubs OT. Greg Silver also up there. He'll be helping out JD on that show. Right now, it's myself, Kerry Crowley, and our good crew at the KNBR studio, Kyle Haar, Kyle Chung, Casey Copeland, keeping everyone updated on the Bay Area sports scene. Giants lose earlier this evening, 6-3. We did plenty of Giants talk, and we may go back to Giants baseball in the 9 o'clock hour. But the 49ers, before I get to the draft, made a tiny bit of news earlier this afternoon, announcing a one-year deal with wide receiver Trent Taylor, who's returning to the organization that originally drafted him in the 5th round of the 2017 NFL draft. Trent Taylor, of course, taken in the 5th round alongside George Kittle in that draft, the great tight end out of Iowa. Taylor's been in the NFL for 7 years, first 4 with the 49ers, then he spent the next 2 with the Cincinnati Bengals. This year, the Chicago Bears, 78 games, 87 receptions for 834 yards and 3 touchdowns. But that's not what's most important. The receiving element isn't actually why the 49ers really needed Trent Taylor on this roster, or determined that they needed Trent Taylor on this roster. They need a punt returner. And for much of his career, Trent Taylor has proven that he can be a solid, if unspectacular, punt returner, that he can handle the ball, that he's not going to make the type of mistake that you saw from Ray McLeod in the Super Bowl. And one of the knocks that I've had on Kyle Shanahan, I think that, he has been such a great coach for the 49ers. And, after they end the Jim Harbaugh era, which was frustrating for me because I, for the first time in my life, saw the 49ers really show some life and really get to the Super Bowl caliber level that I thought that they were at there. They go through the tough years with Jim Tomsula, Chip Kelly, and they ultimately get to Kyle Shanahan and have some tough years at the beginning of that. And I think that he and John Lynch have done an outstanding job building this roster, putting the 49ers in positions where they can win consistently, getting them to 2 Super Bowls. And yet, they haven't finished the job yet, and that's been disappointing, especially for all of us who are around 30 years old, 35 years old, who haven't witnessed a Super Bowl in our lifetime or one we can remember. But the one knock that I really have on Kyle Shanahan, aside from his second half of the Super Bowl game planning and game calling, is the fact that special teams has gone, at times, ignored or undervalued, might be the better word to use when it comes to Kyle Shanahan and special teams. I don't think he ignores it. I mean, he used a 3rd-round draft pick on a kicker last year to replace Robbie Gould with Jake Moody. And the 49ers have, clearly valued Mitch Wishnowsky, their punter, but the coverage units on kickoff and punt have never been great. The kickoff return unit has never been good, and the punt return situation under Kyle Shanahan has never felt settled. They've had guys in and out. They wanted Ray McLeod to be the guy, and he makes that, catastrophic error for the 49ers in the Super Bowl. And I just think, yes, Trent Taylor is someone who can help this situation, but ultimately, I don't love Trent Taylor, the player. I don't think he's the world's best punt returner. I'm just happy that Kyle found someone who he thinks can do the job, who he can feel comfortable in saying, hey, go back, make sure you're not messing things up for the offense, make sure that you're a net positive back there, and you move forward with that. So ultimately, I'm fine with the signing. I think that Trent Taylor is not someone who's going to be a standout on this 53-man roster, and you're not signing anyone on April 16th of any year who is going to be. And if the 49ers decide that this is the way that they address the punt return game, so be it. I'm just happy that they're paying a little bit more attention to it and putting some value in it. Even though I don't love Taylor's explosiveness, I think that sure-handedness, if that's the way that the 49ers want to go about special teams, they want to play it safe, that's fine by me. Just make sure that the offense is ready to drive 80 yards instead of 75 or 75 instead of 70 in particular situations. And again, I think that, in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, around Santa Clara, we're fortunate to talk about a 49ers team to where we can debate the minutia of punt returns because they've been so good in other areas. But with all of that being said, the 49ers do have a first-round draft pick this year, and they must address a few different positions. Matt Mayoko, 49ers insider, you've heard him throughout the past few weeks on KNBR talking about the 49ers and saying, they have this luxury right now of needing to draft in the first round, but not needing a starter at any particular position. And I would actually say that I think that they do need a starter at a few different positions. I think that they could use a right tackle who could then slide Colton McKivitz to right guard, and then maybe a year from now, if Trent Williams decides to call it quits, you move that right tackle that you draft this year to left tackle, and you continue building on the offensive line. I think that that's a need for this team. And I also think that despite the additions made on the defensive line this offseason, that with the subtraction of Eric Armstead, you would really like to bring in someone who can be both a starter at defensive tackle and can rush the passer in certain situations. You'd like the guy who has the ability to both, be big enough to play on second and third down against the run on the interior and be fast enough to play on first down opposite Nick Bosa. And obviously Leonard Floyd was signed to be the flank to Nick Bosa on the outside to rush the passer and get after him in a way that the 49ers were not able to do during the 2023 season. But I think the 49ers team would benefit from kind of a hybrid defensive tackle, defensive end, the way that Armstead has played through the last, 8 seasons in Santa Clara, has done such a great job for the organization. Obviously, I think that he's past his prime, but I was also very sad to see him go this offseason, sign with the Jacksonville Jaguars, because there are certainly productive years, productive downs left in Armstead's career. And it's tough when, a guy who's given so much for the organization and didn't win the big one with this team has to go on somewhere else. And so what will the 49ers do? I think that you can make a compelling case that they should trade up. And I say that because they've got 11 picks in this year's first round. And this is a deep first round class, but every year, you get past pick 15, pick 20, and it's harder and harder to find those true impact value guys. And, every year teams hit on guys in the third round, the fifth round. The 49ers have done it with George Kittle, with Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, fifth round pick. Oftentimes you're still going to be able to find value in those rounds. I just think it's a surer bet the more you move up. And so with the 49ers currently slated to pick 31st, I could see them packaging a few picks and maybe a pick next year to get into the top 20. And David Lombardi of The Athletic had a mock draft the other day where the 49ers were moving up to, I believe, the 18th slot in the draft to ultimately take offensive tackle Troy Fautanu out of Washington, who is, mocked right around the 15 to 20 slot right now in most professional mocks, and, could very well slide in on the right side of the 49ers offensive line and give them the peace of mind that they need at offensive tackle to feel good about their offensive line. I make the case that the 49ers might be better off moving into the top 25 and taking someone like a Chop Robinson from Penn State or a Darius Robinson out of Missouri, because even though those guys are players who could theoretically be available to you at 31, if you move up, if you sacrifice a few mid-round draft picks, the 49ers aren't hurting themselves in the long run by getting rid of a few of those picks, because this is not going to be an 11 draft pick class. I'm telling you right now, they're going to find ways to execute some trades to where they're only picking 8 or 9 guys at most, because they can't keep 11 players on their 53-man roster. It may be a year where the 49ers can only keep 5 or 6 overall. And so going after a Chop Robinson, an edge from Penn State who might have the ability to play some inside as well, that could benefit them in the long run. Or Darius Robinson, who I really like, defensive tackle out of Missouri. He has slid outside in his career. He might be the better fit for this team. But the bottom line is you want some versatility in the guy that you're bringing in. And if you move up, which I think the 49ers are positioned to do because of their stable of picks in the middle rounds, you want someone who can start right away. And I think that, a Darius Robinson in particular out of Missouri, you could start him at the defensive tackle position and you play him next to Hargrave, and all of a sudden you're set. You're not thinking about the defensive line. Second round, you take a corner or an offensive tackle. Third round, you take the opposite position there, and you start to feel really good about the depth that you're building at those positions. But I think that there's still a debate to be had about where they go. There's so many people who are ready to say it's offensive tackle, it's offensive line, because that's where the depth of this class is, because you look at big boards, you look at mock drafts, and that's where you're consistently finding players who might slide from In some years, they could be the 15th pick. This year, because there's so much depth at offensive tackle, they might be the 30th or 31st pick. So the 49ers would benefit from that. But I still think the 49ers ought to be aggressive because of the number of picks they have, because of the urgency that they have to win a Super Bowl, and because the higher up you pick, really the surer of a pick a guy becomes. So on the other side, we'll continue to debate some of these names and what the 49ers should do after they make this first pick. I'm Kerry Crowley, the show Sports Phone KNBR. Warriors and Kings back underway in the third quarter up at Golden 1. John Dickinson and Greg Silver will come your way later on this evening from Sacramento with Dubs OT. We got probably another hour or so here on the leader just hanging out. I'm Kerry Crowley. You're listening to KNBR 104.5, 680, the Sports Leader.
Your mind on the sports leader. Sports Phone KNBR keeps coming at you. Streaming live at twitch.tv/the sports leader.
We are back. Kerry Crowley rolling with you until the end of the Dubs-Kings game tonight up in Sacramento. Second half underway. Warriors were trailing by 4 at halftime, and that lead has since grown for the Sacramento Kings. They're up 64-57, almost midway through the third quarter, so we will continue to update you on that game. But again, not watching it tonight. We're keeping things focused on the Giants and the 49ers until that game wraps up, and then we will bring you Dubs OT from Golden One with John Dickinson leading the way for our coverage the rest of the evening. I'm Kerry Crowley. The show is Sports Phone KNBR. A moment ago, I was talking about why I think the 49ers ought to go defense in the first round. And quite honestly, it's because I think that the loss of Eric Armstead is going to be more significant than most of us understand. Even if he did miss games at the back end of this season, and even if he wasn't playing at 100%, he's just been such a foundational pillar for the 49ers ever since he was drafted out of Oregon, and so versatile for this 49ers team that, hey, if there's a year where, the 49ers need more help on the edge, they kick Armstead out to the edge. If there's a year where they feel good about the edge and they need more help on the interior, he comes and he plays more 3-tech, and that's great. And it's benefited the 49ers defense so much because Armstead has had both the ability to be a net positive against the pass and against the run. And you saw him show up time and again big in playoff games for this team. Some of his best football was played in January as a 49er. And there's just very few NFL players you can say that about because the season takes such a toll on their bodies. And so the 49ers have made some additions. Gross Matos, Malik Collins. There are guys who have been added to this defensive line who can help. But I do think that there are still players in the first round of this NFL draft who they ought to look at. I mentioned Chop Robinson, the edge out of Penn State. I mentioned Darius Robinson, who, very similar skill set to Eric Armstead, and then he can play on the interior and the edge out of Missouri. He did a lot of that in his early college career. And, Laiatu Latu, the edge from UCLA, Olu Fashanu, the defensive tackle from Penn State, those are both players who, if the 49ers really wanted to move up in the draft and really wanted to get aggressive, and let's say the top 10 plays out so offensive heavy that they're available, 49ers could go from 31 to inside the top 20 and ultimately end up with someone who in a normal year might be a top 10 pick. But this is not shaping up to be a normal draft because so many quarterbacks are going to fly off the board. It's looking like 2021 where you've got the potential of 5 quarterbacks going in the top 15 this year with obviously Caleb Williams going number 1 to the Chicago Bears. There's a lot of intel out there that suggests that Jaden Daniels out of LSU, formerly of Arizona State, is going to go to the Washington Commanders at 2. You could have a trade into the top 5 at 3 to where Drake May is going at 3. There's a number of different quarterbacks. J.J. McCarthy has been linked to both the Minnesota Vikings and the New York Giants who could potentially trade up. There's so many teams that are searching for their next franchise quarterback that there's an opportunity for teams toward the bottom of the first round to get the guys who slide because all of those teams are going to be reaching for their quarterbacks, probably outside of Caleb Williams and the Bears at number 1, and maybe Jaden Daniels and the Commanders at 2. But, even the Vegas Raiders could be convinced to move up and take Michael Penix out of Washington. They could move up to 10 to 12, get in a situation where they're picking a quarterback and you see 5 go off the board in the first 12 picks. And the ripple effect of that is a team like the 49ers sitting at 31 could ultimately decide, hey, enough players have slid who we have top 10 grades on that are available in the teens and early 20s that it's worth it for us to sacrifice some of the future because the present is so urgent. And I really do believe that few franchises feel the urgency of this moment like the San Francisco 49ers do right now. What I mean by that is, every team enters the season hoping to win a Super Bowl, but there's probably only 8 to 10 that have a realistic shot of doing it. And for the past 5 seasons, the 49ers have been one of those 8 to 10 teams. And in 2024, they anticipate being a part of that group. And they're really a part of the inner circle of teams, maybe the top 3 or 4 that you anticipate to get to a conference championship game. And it would be a surprise if they weren't there. And because of that, and because of the cap situation, where after the 2024 season, you're likely going to have to pay Brock Purdy, you're going to be in a situation where you may have to make even more difficult calls after making the decision that you couldn't bring back Eric Armstead this year. Then you're talking about a team that probably moves away from that inner circle and is more in the 8 to 10 range of their realistic feasibility of winning a Super Bowl. And who knows what it looks like beyond that, because you'll be paying Brock Purdy more money. You won't be able to spread it around the rest of the roster. It just gets dicey. And so the reason I say you move up is because of the urgency. And let's say the 49ers do that. Let's say they move up and they take a defensive tackle or an offensive tackle. I think the next move in the second round is to take a corner, regardless of which line they address. And I know that sounds silly, but I still think that you can find quality linemen sitting around in the third and the fourth, and sometimes even the fifth rounds. Like the 49ers found Spencer Burford, who, he's not forcing the issue at right guard, but he's a competent player at that position in the fourth round. Colt McKivitz was a mid-round draft pick. They have mostly built this offensive line outside of Trent Williams, who was, a legend when the 49ers acquired him. I think that they've mostly built this offensive line out of guys outside of the first round. And you can continue to do that if you go defensive tackle early and you go corner in the second round. And I believe that the 49ers should go corner because this, to me, is the time to take advantage of moving Deommodore Lenoir into the slot. Because I really do believe that slot corner is the most difficult position to play in the modern NFL. With all of the offenses moving to 11 personnel, so much motion being used, and so many brilliant offensive coordinators looking to create mismatches on the edge, your slot corner has to be a guy who has a two-way go, can go to his right, can go to his left, can go inside, outside, come up to stop the run, move back, play zone coverage, play man coverage. He has to be one of the best athletes on the field at all times. And Deommodore Lenoir has that type of athleticism. And last year, the 49ers tried to address the slot corner issue preseason by bringing in Steve Wilks' handpicked guy in Isaiah Oliver. And 2 games into the year, it was clear that Isaiah Oliver was not that dude. And so you get to a point where you're in the Super Bowl and you're at times using Logan Ryan, a veteran safety who you signed off the street late in the season because of injury issues. Talanoa Hufanga out. You're expending everything you can for Tashawn Gibson, Jair Brown dealing with injuries toward the end of the year. So you're using Logan Ryan at times in the slot. And that's something that you want to avoid. And so I say install Lenoir the nickel or draft the nickel of the future, your slot corner, and go from there. And you can find that player in the second round of this year's draft. I am exceedingly confident. In fact, there's been a number of mock drafts that have already tied the 49ers to Max Melton, this slot and outside corner hybrid out of Rutgers, who I think would be a great fit for the 49ers. Melton, I'm looking at the Athletics Top 100 consensus big board right now. He's 59th. I think the 49ers pick, 52, 53 in the second round. He's been mocked to them. It wouldn't be a reach to go there. And then if Melton turns out to be your nickel, great. You keep Lenoir on the outside. If Melton is a better fit on the outside, Lenoir becomes your nickel. But I don't think the 49ers are in a position to rely on Rock Ya-Sin, who they've just signed. I don't think you want to rely on Ambry Thomas, who, has had his moments through the years, but more maybe negative moments than positive moments, if we're being honest. Samuel Womack showed some potential last year at the nickel corner position, but just didn't seem to have the size to be able to do what the 49ers wanted. And so I think that you just eliminate questions by either committing to Lenoir in the slot or drafting that slot. Because you go back to 2019 when the 49ers got good under Kyle Shanahan, and one of the reasons on defense they were so good is they didn't have to think about the slot. K'Wan Williams took care of it. And I'll tell you, these teams with great slot corners, they're able to slow down the McDaniels, the McVays, the Shanahans of the world because they limit the options and they limit the flexibility on the outside. If you can cover both a tight end and a wide receiver, if you can step up against the run, you are helping yourself out, you're helping the team out, and you are in the head of another team's offensive coordinator. And so that's why I say, hey, regardless of what the 49ers do in the first round, whether they commit to offense or defensive line, I say you have to in the second round, go after a corner, and then you go back to the line thing. And one more thing for the 49ers. Let's stop drafting running backs in the middle rounds. Clearly, Kyle Shanahan every year falls in love with the guy, whether it be Trey Sermon or Ty Davis-Price. But that evaluation at this point has to fall on someone else's shoulders. I think that the 49ers have to accept that maybe Kyle isn't the best guy to evaluate running backs if he isn't looking at the very best one in the NFL in Christian McCaffrey. Because the players that they've drafted, they've made some mistakes on. And yeah, sure, he identified Raheem Mostert way back when. And Matt Breida at times was a productive player for the 49ers. But the one area where I think that Kyle may be in over his head when it comes to the draft is these mid-round running backs. Who was it? Joe Williams out of Washington? Was he the first one the 49ers straight up and drafted? Yeah. So just spend a few picks on the line, whether it be offense or defense, build some depth there, and have everyone feel better about themselves. 415-808-KNBR is the number. Got plenty more for you here tonight on Sports Phone. On the other side, talking about the biggest sports stories of the day, including the one play-in game that has already come to an end. The Pelicans fall to the Lakers. They will host the winner of this Kings-Warriors matchup on Friday evening in New Orleans. We'll keep you updated on Kings-Warriors. We'll take you around Major League Baseball with scores from around the league. And, of course, we will let you know the biggest sports stories of the day. I'm Kerry Crowley. The show is Sports on KNBR. You're listening to KNBR 104.5, 680, the sports leader.
Giants fans, this is your hub to have your voice heard. Sports Phone KNBR, streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
It's McCollum on the inbound. Vincent will defend, and that's it. The Lakers have won. The Lakers are the 7th seed, and they'll take on the champion Denver Nuggets in the first round in a rematch of last season's Western Conference Finals. The Pelicans will play the winner of Golden State and Sacramento coming up minutes from now on TNT.
Back here on Sports Phone KNBR, Kerry Crowley hanging out with you just a little bit longer. Warriors and Kings up in Sacramento, late third quarter in that one. It's 86-73, the Sacramento Kings leading. So the Warriors need to rally. There's no other way to say it. They want to play Friday against New Orleans. They want to get to New Orleans. They've got to surge over the final 14 minutes of this ball game. Sure, Kevin Harlan on that call there, and I do think the way that this has all fallen in the Western Conference has been very interesting. The New Orleans Pelicans, a 49-win team. They've been great this season. They've gotten contributions up and down the roster. They've got a clear star in Zion Williamson, who scored 40 tonight. The Pelicans are going to be playing for their lives on Friday evening against the winner of Kings and Warriors. And it's crazy to me because you look at this team that would be, the 3 seed in the East? And right now, if they win on Friday, they'll have to go to the number 1 seed, the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is just a testament to the incredible depth and star power in the West. And it shows how the Warriors have found themselves in this position this year because, look, I think after the 2022 championship, we saw the Warriors take a step back last year. And they beat the Sacramento Kings in 7 games in that first-round playoff series, and it was a weird year. The Draymond, Jordan Poole fight, there were just so many elements of last season that felt off, and yet they still finished as the 6th seed, and they still won their first playoff series, still advanced the Western Conference semis. And so, yes, they were eliminated, and they come back this year, and I feel as if they've been an improved team over the course of an 82-game season. In fact, their record shows they've been an improved team. But because the West is so deep and because the Warriors got off to a slow start, and didn't really hit the ground running until the end of January. They find themselves in this position where they improved. Their talent is better. The contributions to the draft picks is more significant. And yet they're fighting for their lives against the Sacramento Kings right now. Another team that also won 46 games this season. And the Warriors now down 15 in this one as the third quarter nears a close. This is what could potentially be the end of the era. And look, I am of the belief that when you pay Steve Kerr $17.5 million over the next 2 seasons and you have Steph Curry under contract, the Warriors are going to do everything in their power to compete, to contend, to rebuild on the fly, to make sure that they put together a roster capable of winning 50 next year. But there really are only so many moves available. And what will Joe Lacob's appetite be for paying the luxury tax if the Warriors are bounced in the play-in? The 10th best team in the Western Conference. There aren't many avenues to improve and catch up with a West that's getting younger. I mean, Oklahoma City, Minnesota, even a team that finished at the bottom of the West this year. The San Antonio Spurs have Wembanyama. I mean, Victor is incredible. He's transcendent, and it will only be a matter of time before the Spurs are back at the top of the Western Conference. And so, even independent of tonight's result, and who knows, the Warriors could pull off an incredible comeback against the Sacramento Kings. They could then go into New Orleans on Friday, take care of business, and be playing in a playoff series. But independent of tonight's result, it's just another reminder that the best days for this franchise are realistically behind them. And as difficult as that is to say, you're starting to come to grips with it with each game and each day that you get removed from that 2022 finals title against the Boston Celtics. And so we'll keep you updated on the Warriors. We will provide you with more insight, more updates tonight. John Dickinson and Greg Silver will be live from Golden One. But the performance so far, not inspiring. The defense in the third quarter, not great. As it comes to an end, the Kings are up 16 right now, 91-75. And so what we'll do is take a spin around Major League Baseball. And we'll start with today's Giants game, because I said that we'd get back to this at 9 o'clock, and I really do want to spend some time here in the 9 o'clock hour before Dubs OT begins talking about the Giants matchup with the Marlins tonight. And I think any Giants fan who watched tonight's game, anyone who is hearing about it for the first time, probably shares the same sentiment of frustration. Because they win last night's ball game, they finally show that they can pull off a comeback. This is a Giants team that has really struggled in the early going of this season to, when it falls behind, show some fight. There have been some losses that have turned quickly into blowouts. And that's something that you have to rectify. And the Giants last night go down 3-0 against the Marlins, and they fight their way back. I thought that Kyle Harrison's performance, where he gives up 3 runs in the second and then grinds his way through 6 innings, that's indicative of the type of performance the Giants are going to need if they are going to change their reputation around baseball and ultimately make the playoffs this year. They're going to be a team that needs to win with great starting pitching, great defense, and limiting mistakes, and they did that last night. They limited mistakes after the second inning. Kyle Harrison gave them a chance. Tyro Estrada kicked off a 3-run rally. Jung-Hoo Lee and Wilmer Flores came through with big contributions, and they pull off one of, I think, their best, most complete wins of the season against the Miami Marlins, because it showed the formula for this team. It's the blueprint that they'll need to follow this year. There's going to be so many tortuous close games this year, but they have to win those games. Tonight had the makings of yet another. Tonight they get out to the 1-0 lead in the second when Matt Chapman blasts a 428-foot homer off of Ryan Weathers, the young lefty for Miami. In the third inning, Wilmer Flores adds to that lead. He doubles in Austin Slater, who was running from first base, made it look easy. The Giants up 2-0. And the way that Jordan Hicks threw for the first 3 innings tonight, you thought, this is going to be yet another 3-2 or 2-1 ball game, and the Giants have to play clean baseball. And in the 4th inning, they made a catastrophic mistake. For any other team, a team with a great offense or a team with just a lights-out bullpen, it may not be a mistake that can come to define a game, but I really thought that tonight, the mistake that Tyler Fitzgerald made stepping over second base and off of second base and trying to turn a double play in the fourth inning ultimately led to the unraveling of the game for the Giants. And, to kind of break things down, the Marlins had, I believe it was runners on the corners with no one out in the fourth inning. And Jordan Hicks gets the ground ball he needs, which he's been so adept at doing in his brief Giants tenure. You just love the way that Jordan Hicks has gone from this all-or-nothing reliever with the St. Louis Cardinals who was consistently pitching for the strikeouts. Now it feels like he can easily figure out a way to roll a double play ball or get out of traffic. So here's the situation. It's the bottom of the fourth inning. Brian De La Cruz has just doubled, and Josh Bell had walked. And so you've got runners on first and second with one out after Jazz Chisholm Jr. struck out earlier in the inning. One run already in because the De La Cruz double had brought home Luis Arraez. And Jordan Hicks is pitching for the double play. And he gets the double play ball, the 6-4-3-1 that should have ended the inning. And if it didn't, okay, you've still got a runner on first base, and you're out of trouble. You get the lead runner. But instead, Nick Ahmed flips the ball over to Tyler Fitzgerald, who comes off of the base. And that's ultimately the undoing for the Giants. Fitzgerald, who's not a regular second baseman, who doesn't practice double plays all that often with Nick Ahmed, makes the mistake that, hey, for another team, it may not be a backbreaker, but with the way the Giants offense has gone through 18 games this season, it was. And unfortunately for the Giants, the inning continues. Jordan Hicks throws 37 pitches, and as a result of that, he's not able to get into the sixth inning. He's not able to pitch deeper into the ball game. He ends up going 5 and giving up 2, and he did great to just give up 2. I thought it was a really gritty outing from Jordan Hicks. I thought it was, this showed that he can really, truly be a strong starting pitcher because he was able to get out of a jam when things weren't going his way. In the first 3 outings, he's shown how dominant he can be when things do go his way and how valuable of an asset he can be to this Giants rotation when things are on. But tonight I thought Jordan Hicks showed that, hey, if something bad happens behind him, he's not going to let it dictate the rest of his outing. It wasn't a pretty 37-pitch fourth inning, but he got through it. And yes, Emmanuel Rivera hit a long fly ball that in some ballparks could have been a grand slam, but it wasn't. Austin Slater caught it on the warning track. They get out of the jam, and then Ryan Walker comes on in the 6th inning and gives it up. And the Giants offense is not able to battle back. Walker gets into a jam. Marlins take the lead. Bob Melvin goes to Taylor Rogers for the left-on-left matchup. Taylor Rogers gives up the bases-loaded single to Luis Arraez, and the Giants ultimately fall 6-3. They mustered a rally in the 7th inning, scoring a run. It was, I don't have it right in front of me, and I'm forgetting because it was a situation where Michael Conforto had led off the inning with a single. Nick Ahmed drilled the ball to the right center field warning track, and then Tyler Fitzgerald didn't hit the ball deep enough to score Conforto from third. So Lamont Wade Jr. comes off the bench, pinch hit, single through the left side of the infield. And the Giants are still in a position to where they can win that ball game, but Wilmer Flores bounces into a inning-ending double play. And it's hard to fault Wilmer Flores. It's hard to fault him for coming up in the 9th inning and making the final out of the game because he came up with the go-ahead hit last night. Last year, he was basically the only hitter whose at-bats were worth watching during the second half of the season. And so it's hard to fault him. But it was just a reminder of, when one thing has gone wrong for this team through 18 games, typically they've lost the ball game. And you would have thought that with the additions that Farhan Zaidi made this offseason and with the significant changes that brought about, that the Giants would have a larger margin for error this season than they did last year. That, when things went wrong in August and September last year, the Giants consistently lost ball games. And you saw that reflected in their record. You saw that reflected in the fact that they were 3rd in the National League around the trade deadline, and they missed the playoffs entirely, which is actually really hard to do in the expanded playoff era. And this year, 7-11 through 18 games. You'd like to say it's not a big enough sample size to really draw major conclusions. And I'm on the side of people who, I agree with that sentiment, and I don't think anything drastic should be done, but I also think that you're well within your rights to be frustrated with the performance of this Giants team. Because one of the main factors in ownership spending all this money this offseason and the front office identifying free agents who can come in and help was ending this playoff drought and ending this prolonged drought of not winning any playoff series. Because the Giants got in 2021, but they were bounced in 5 games after the 107-win season. The Dodgers beat them in the NLDS at Oracle Park. And so you have to go back to the World Series in 2014 for the last time the Giants won a playoff series. And no, I don't count the 2016 wildcard game against the Mets because it was just a one-off. And so since 2016, they have not really been in a consistent position to where September baseball's been meaningful. It was true in 2022. It was true for basically the second half of September in 2023 when they really fell out of the race. And so they spend all this money to be able to beat up on the bad teams, to say, hey, we may not be the Dodgers, we may not be the Braves, but we can be in the mix. We can compete with the Brewers, with the Padres, with the Diamondbacks, with the Cardinals, with the Cubs. And right now, you look at the National League standings, it's early. The Giants are behind most of those teams. And yes, there's 146 games to make all of that up. There's plenty of time to, have all of these offseason acquisitions make their impact. But you've already lost a series to the Washington Nationals at home, I might add. You didn't hit a home run in your first 6 games at home at Oracle Park. And now you're in danger of losing to the Miami Marlins, losing a series to the Miami Marlins. And I've said this several times over the last few weeks. First impressions aren't everything in baseball. In fact, they probably matter less in this sport than any other. But if there was ever a year where the first impression mattered for the Giants, it's this one. Because Farhan's on his second manager. He's 5-6 years in to his tenure as the president of baseball operations. And the Giants farm system has not produced enough talent. They've had to go out and spend a ton of money because they don't have the players internally who can turn them into a playoff contender. These are all issues that, believe me, they will consistently pop up if the Giants don't find a way to rectify this thing in very quick fashion. Text from the 747. So far, Tyler Fitzgerald in 2 different games has made an error, and I think his errors have contributed to the Giants losing both of those games. And yes, it's also one of the great challenges of relying on utility players to fill in around the diamond. And it's one of the reasons finding a utility player is so hard, a good one. Why Ben Zobrist had such surplus value for the Tampa Bay Rays and the Chicago Cubs for years. Because if you're able to play multiple positions and make up for the fact that, you're not playing every day by spelling another guy and making sure that your team doesn't notice when he's out of the lineup, you're a great player. But tonight, Giants fans noticed that Thairo Estrada was not at second base, flipping that double play. And, there will be times this season where the Giants ask Fitzgerald to play first. There will be times this season where they ask him to play short, center field. He'll be asked to go all over the diamond. He has one of the hardest jobs on the roster. He's also one of the most inexperienced players on the roster. So I cut him a little bit of slack. But at the same time, the play that he had to make tonight is one that anyone who's put in at second base needs to be able to make. And I'm not saying that he has to make the throw to first to complete the double play, but you do have to keep that foot on the bag. That's a fundamental that you can't miss. And that's something that had to be covered during spring training that he knows any level you're playing at. Second base, you have to stay on the bag because replay nowadays is ruthless. There's no neighborhood play like there was for years where you get credit for coming close. The old Derek Jeter neighborhood play. It's not alive in Major League Baseball anymore. And the Giants burned because of it tonight and ultimately not able to come back once Ryan Walker gives up the lead in that 7th inning. And in that 6th inning, once Taylor Rogers comes in and gives up the bases loaded single with 2 outs to Luis Arias. On the other side, we'll take a spin around Major League Baseball, give you the scores, stats, standings from around the game as the Warriors are now down big time against the Sacramento Kings. Looking like, barring a miracle, the Warriors season could be coming to an end. They trail 97-78 with under 10 to go up at Golden 1. I'm Kerry Crowley. The show is Sports Phone KNBR. You're listening to KNBR 104.5, 680, the sports leader.
This is where we feed the faithful. Sports Phone, KNBR. Streaming live at twitch.tv/The Sports Leader.
Folks, it's a brutal scene for Warriors fans up in Sacramento. 7 minutes to go. The Warriors down 99-84 to the Sacramento Kings. Season on the brink. Could be all over here. I mean, we've discussed this, and we will discuss this on KNBR later on this evening. John Dickinson will be here for Dubs OT just as soon as this game wraps up in Sacramento. And barring a miracle, the Warriors are going to have to take a long, hard look in the mirror this offseason. Joe Lacob's going to have to do a serious evaluation of this franchise. Mike Dunleavy Jr., the general manager, is going to have to get creative. Look, it's not over yet. It's a 13-point deficit with under 7 to play after the most recent Warriors basket. But, yeah, I think everyone has that thought in their mind. Klay Thompson has not scored in 27 minutes tonight. Part of the starting lineup, 0 for 9 from the field, 0 for 5 from beyond the arc, 0 points. Andrew Wiggins, minus 25 in the plus-minus column. He has been a net negative in every lineup he's been a part of tonight. Steph Curry has given the Warriors 20. Draymond Green, 12 with 3 rebounds. You just look at these stat lines right now, and it's not good. It is not good at all for this Warriors team. So as that game winds down, I'm going to let the expert John Dickinson break down the Warriors matchup tonight. It's just hard not to think about, what this franchise has been and where it might be headed. But we're going to take one more spin around Major League Baseball, keep you updated on the scores from this evening. Of course, mentioned that the Giants lose 6-3 to the Miami Marlins. Opportunity to still win a series tomorrow. I've been pretty negative on the Giants front tonight because I really feel like they let one slip away in Miami this evening. But Ryan Walker gets the loss. He falls to 1-2 on the season. Ryan Weathers gets the win for the Marlins. 2-1, 2.70 ERA as Weathers struck out 10 Giants players. The Giants 7-11. The Marlins 4-14 on the season right now. Giants can't say they need a win tomorrow, but they really should win tomorrow. You can't lose a series to the Nationals and the Marlins and think of yourselves as a playoff contender. Top of the 9th inning up in Seattle right now, where Ryan Stanek is on the mound trying to close out the Cincinnati Reds. The Mariners up 3-1 in that ball game. The Reds 9-7 on this season, off to a decent start. And Spencer Steers at the plate representing the tying run in that one. So we may keep you updated on the Mariners and the Reds if the Mariners are able to finish that one off. Down at Dodger Stadium, the Dodgers up 5-2 over the Washington Nationals. Dodgers only 11-8 through their first 19 games this season. I say only. I mean, they're still 3 games above 500, still well above the San Francisco Giants, their rivals in the standings. But you would have thought with the $1 billion offseason and the urgency to make a first impression that the Dodgers would be well on their way to looking like a 110-win team so far this season. That has not been the case. Tanner Rainey on the mound for the Nationals right now. Miguel Rojas at the plate as the Dodgers look to add to their 5-2 lead in the bottom of the 8th inning. You got a wild one down in the desert right now as the Chicago Cubs have taken an 11-9 lead over the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Cubs 10-6 despite placing Seiya Suzuki on the injured list today. He's been one of their 2 good offensive players so far. It's Michael Busch, who was traded from the Dodgers, and Seiya Suzuki, he goes to the IL, is out 4 weeks at least with an oblique strain. And Ian Happ hits a grand slam to put the Cubs ahead in that one. Jake McCarthy at the plate, I should say, for the Arizona Diamondbacks as they're trying to claw their way back in the bottom of the 7th inning. They've got a runner in scoring position, so that one far from over right now. Every other game that we'll give you updates on for the rest of this segment is final this evening. The Detroit Tigers take one over Bruce Bochy's Texas Rangers. The Rangers off to a 9-9 start through their first 18 games. The Tigers off to a pleasant 10-7 start. Andrew Chafin gets the win. Jose Urena gets the loss for the Tigers. Final in Baltimore this evening, where the Orioles take it 11-3 over the Twins, who are just 6-10 right now. Grayson Rodriguez, who a year ago was one of the top pitching prospects in all of Major League Baseball, he gets the win. He moves to 3-0 with a 2.63 ERA. Chris Paddock takes the loss for the Minnesota Twins. Remember when he popped onto the scene with the San Diego Padres just a few years ago? Paddock, 0-1, 8.36 ERA, coming off of a Tommy John surgery about a year and a half ago as he fights his way back to try and become a relevant starter in the major leagues once again. Final in Philly earlier this evening, Citizens Bank Ballpark. Ranger Suarez tosses a shutout against the Colorado Rockies. The Philadelphia Phillies win at 5-0. Austin Gomber takes the loss in that one. The Rockies already down to 4-14 on the season, so the same record as the Miami Marlins. They've been putrid. The Colorado Rockies last night, an update to this situation that we discussed yesterday evening. The Rockies, for whatever reason, late in the game, their bench was short. It was a tie ball game, and they wanted to preserve one more bat, so they send opening day starter Kyle Freeland out to the base paths. And Kyle Freeland ultimately works his way around the base paths, gets in a collision at home plate, and breaks his arm. The Colorado Rockies, a franchise that have just been run into the ground by the Montfort family through the years, they lose their opening day starter to an injury on the bases late in the ball game. For the life of me, I cannot figure out the mismanagement that it would take for that type of a situation to happen. But again, it did. The Phillies won last night, and they win tonight easily, 5-0. Final in 13 innings tonight at the Trop in Tampa. Garrett Clevenger gets the win as the Tampa Bay Rays win at 7-6 over the Angels. Carson Fulmer takes the loss for Los Angeles in that one. Toronto Blue Jays win at 5-4 over the New York Yankees. Former Giant Carlos Rodon takes the loss in that ball game. Yusei Kikuchi gets the win for the Toronto Blue Jays. Yankees 12-6 now. Blue Jays 10-8. Another extra inning ball game to update you on. Final in 11 innings as the Cleveland Guardians, Stephen Vogt's Cleveland Guardians, improved to 12-5 on the young season with a 10-7 victory over the Boston Red Sox. Emmanuel Clase gets the win in that one. Scott Barlow with the save for Cleveland. Final in Queens this evening as the New York Mets win at 3-1 over the Pittsburgh Pirates. Do not recognize any of the pitchers in that ball game. So, take that for what it's worth. The Pirates fall to 11-7 on the season. The Mets 9-8. Final in Milwaukee as the San Diego Padres beat the Milwaukee Brewers 6-3 earlier today. Dylan Cease 2-1 now with a 1.99 ERA. He's been quite a pickup for the Padres after being traded by the woeful Chicago White Sox at the outset of this season. Houston Astros lose 6-2 to the Atlanta Braves tonight. Astros Hunter Brown was on the mound taking the loss in that one. He's now 0-3 with a 10.54 ERA. Raisel Iglesias gets the save for Atlanta. Final in Oakland over at the Coliseum. They finished up quick this evening as Lance Lynn gets the 3-2 win over Danny Jimenez, who takes the loss for the Oakland A's. Ryan Helsley gets the save in that one for St. Louis, which improves to 9-9 on the season. And there was one postponed ball game earlier today. The Royals and the 2-14 Chicago White Sox were rained out today in Chicago. So once again, keeping you updated on that score. The Giants lose 6-3 to the Miami Marlins earlier today, and keeping you updated on the Warriors score in Sacramento right now. It's still ugly. They're down 106-86 with 5:11 to go. The clock is ticking on this Warriors season. The miracle's obviously not going to happen, folks. John Dickinson will be here shortly to break it all down from Golden One, but needless to say, a disappointing, frustrating, ugly exit to the season for the Golden State Warriors. And there were a lot of confident folks, not just here at KNBR, I think all around the Bay Area. I think Warriors fans emanated confidence after what we saw from this Warriors team last year up at Golden One in Game 7. Steph Curry and the 6th-seeded Warriors, he goes for 50 against the Sacramento Kings in Game 7 as they upset the upstart Kings, and you're thinking, okay, they've got the experience, they've played well over the last few months, the Kings have really had a tough time getting things together. And from the outset tonight, the Kings won the first quarter by 9 points. The Warriors closed the deficit around halftime. I think it was 55-50. And then the Kings just opened it right back up in the third quarter. Mike Brown out coaching Steve Kerr from everything that I've read so far from the trusted reporters who were on the scene. And the Warriors, again, struggling in the fourth quarter. Klay Thompson, 29 minutes tonight, no points. Andrew Wiggins, 25 minutes tonight. He's a -25 in the plus-minus column. I mean, that is unfathomable in a game like this. And the Warriors just didn't get it done with their starting unit. The reserves, the kids, Kuminga, Moody, Pajemski kept them close in the second quarter. But the way that this game has gone, not according to the way any of the folks here at KNBR and I think most Warriors fans would have anticipated. And there's going to be big picture questions now hanging over this franchise. You know, is the dynasty run over? I mean, I don't see them salvaging the dynasty in its current form. And it's going to be a long offseason for Joe Lacob, for Mike Dunleavy, for Steve Kerr. And I would imagine with under 5 minutes to play, folks up in Sacramento wearing blue and gold are already thinking about that offseason. So we will keep you updated on that one. We'll throw things over to John Dickinson when he gets set up at Golden One. Greg Silver going to join him. I'm Kerry Crowley, the show Sports Zone KNBR. We will keep you updated on things later on this evening. You're listening to KNBR 104.5, 680, the sports leader.
It sound right, boys. Sound right, boys. It sound right, boy.
Dub Nation, dial the digits and dive in. 415-808-KNBR. Sports Phone KNBR continues right here and on the all-new KNBR app.
Well, folks, the texts are already pouring in as the Warriors about to lose in miserable fashion. And the texts are pouring in all directed at the morning show, who must have expressed a ton of confidence. Good luck to Murph and Marcus when they open the text line tomorrow morning. I'm sure John Dickinson and Dubs OT will elicit a lot. But, man, what a disappointing and ugly way for this to go down up at Golden One. The Warriors now down 116-90 with under 2 to play at Golden One Center in Sacramento. And to give you the update on this game, it could be Klay Thompson's last game as a member of the Golden State Warriors. Obviously, one of the most impactful players in the history of the franchise. Someone who I think not just every Warriors fan, but genuinely speaking, every basketball fan has enjoyed the highs of Klay's career, because you're not talking about someone who was ever considered at any point a top 5 player in the sport, and probably even a top 10 player in the sport. Yeah, he made all-star teams, but he was always the splash brother, the sidekick to Steph Curry. And, of course, had the incredible 60-plus point game, has made an incredibly high volume of three-pointers. And aside from everything that he's accomplished in leading the Warriors to 4 titles with Steph Curry and Draymond Green, he's been one of the most fun, affable guys to watch, to root for. When he gets hot, it's just there are a few things as a sports fan that compare to Klay starting to feel it from beyond the arc. And, folks, it didn't happen tonight. Klay Thompson, 0 for 10 from the field, 0 for 6 from three-point range, and 0 points in 32 minutes in what should otherwise be a forgettable way to go out. This is, if it is Klay Thompson's last game with the Warriors, this is a memory that's going to stick with people. If he has 8 points, 10 points, 12 points, people are going to forget the final number. But Klay finishing with 0 points and the Warriors losing in crushing fashion in the postseason, early in the postseason. Well, I guess you can't even call the play in the postseason for the second year in a row. This is the end. This is the end of the dynasty. This is the end of what was a run that surpassed every expectation anyone could have had for the Warriors when they drafted Steph and Klay and Draymond. But the way that this has gone out, you would have liked to have seen them finish with a little bit more of a fight. And it didn't happen tonight up at Golden One. Still waiting on the final score. There's under 30 seconds with a stoppage now, and John Dickinson will be here to bring you all of that post-game coverage. Greg Silver will join him from Golden One in Sacramento, but so many people so confident that the Warriors would get the job done. And, man, it's not happening. I'll tell you, these texts that are rolling in for Brian Murphy and Marcus Boucher, good luck reading them this morning. There's a lot of folks who are already mentioning how everyone was thinking ahead to Friday and whether the Warriors would be taking on the Pelicans or the Lakers. Well, it's going to be Sacramento, and it's going to be New Orleans, and it's going to be at the Smoothie King Center. The Warriors season is coming to an end right this second. In fact, it has come to an end. A 118-94 drubbing at the hands of the Sacramento Kings. A 46-36 season, all for naught. The Warriors, in theory, improved over last year. But in the grand scheme of things, after being the 6th seed a year ago and beating the Sacramento Kings and advancing, they take another step back here at the end of 2024. They step back in a way that indicates that, this isn't just the end, but there's going to be a lot of rethinking about the big picture direction of this franchise and what happens next. It was only a few weeks ago that Steve Kerr signed his extension. Steph Curry's still under contract. Draymond Green's still under contract. But the first question that everyone's going to be thinking about, what's next for Klay Thompson? And where does he go from here? After a 32-minute, 0 for 10 0-point performance against the Sacramento Kings. One of the most beloved figures in Bay Area sports. It's hard to believe that this really could be the way that he goes out. So on the other side, John Dickinson and Greg Silver will be here to provide you updates from the scene at Golden One Center in Sacramento. They'll have post-game sound for you here tonight. I know that Casey's been around the studio. Kyle has been working hard this evening, both Kyle Haar and Kyle Chung, on making this show about as successful as possible. And folks, if I'm being honest, I know that most of you were watching the Warriors tonight. And if you're listening to this show, it's because you're out on the road hoping that Dubs OT comes on shortly. So we're going to take a quick break here and try and make the connection with our guys in Sacramento. If we don't make it right away, I'll continue talking about the end of this Warriors season. But man, this is not the way that anyone anticipated tonight would go down, and certainly one of the more disappointing ways it could have gone down. Hard to imagine a worse way for a season to end for a Warriors team that was thinking ahead, was thinking about a potential first-round upset and what would happen on Friday, and they couldn't get past the Sacramento Kings. 118-94 is the final. On the other side, Dubs OT from Sacramento. I'm Kerry Crowley. You're listening. Sports on KNBR, KNBR 104.5, 680, the sports leader.
The nighttime is the right time for Sports Phone KNBR. Let's f***ing go on the sports leader. Streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
All right, we are still waiting for Greg Silver and John Dickinson to make the connection up in Sacramento. The texts continue to roll in, and I promise you, When Dubs OT starts, they will open the phone lines, and it will be an opportunity for everyone to sound off. 5-4-1 up in Bend, Oregon. What a pathetic performance by the Dubs. And, man. Social media is not a good place to be right now if you're a Warriors fan. A 118-94 loss. The Warriors, the 10 seed in the West. Just 2 years removed from their last title. Their fourth of the dynasty era. The 10th seed and bounced in the play-in by the Sacramento Kings. And this will go down as one of the Kings' biggest wins the last 2 decades. I mean, you talk about a franchise that's been hungry, a franchise that's wanted to taste success, and no better team for the Kings to beat than the Warriors, who they've had to watch from up in Sacramento, which makes the Warriors' loss all that more difficult to stomach for Golden State fans. And the way that it ends, a brutal performance from Andrew Wiggins, minus 25 tonight. Klay Thompson not scoring. The Warriors unable to figure anything out down low. Jonathan Kuminga kept the Warriors in the game at the end of the first half, and he ultimately finishes 6 of 15 from the field, which is 16 points. Moses Moody scores 16.